Okay, so in this video, we're being asked to prove that 0 factorial is going to be 1. Now, in order to do this problem, you have to know what a factorial is. And a factorial is simply when you start at a number and you multiply down all the way until you get to 1. So for example, if I start at 5 factorial, that is essentially the same thing as doing 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Right? And notice how we are dealing with integers here, no decimal. So we start at the number in question, in this case here, 5. And since it's a factorial, we do 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1. Now, there is a formula you can use here. I have it boxed in red. This is essentially how you can expand out a factorial. So if we use this formula in red, and I do 5 factorial again, essentially what you're going to be doing, since my x is going to be 5 here, I'm going to put a 5 here. And then in parentheses, I do 5 minus 1. And we know that that's going to give me 4. And then I do 5 minus 2. That will give me 3. And if I do 5 minus 3, that gives me 2. And so on. And I'm going to do this until I get to 1. So eventually, I'm going to do 5 minus 4. I'll get 1. And then I stop there. So what we want to prove here is that 0 factorial is going to be 1. Now, in the example that I did here, I used 5 factorial. So now I want to take a look at 0 factorial. And the definition of a factorial is, again, when you start at the number in question and you multiply down all the way until you get to 1. Well, if you start at 0 factorial, I have already gone past 1. So if I try to start at 0 and multiply down to 1, I can't. It's impossible. So at this point here, you may be asking, well, how do I prove that 0 factorial is in fact going to be 1? And again, this is where the formula is going to come into play. What we're going to have to do here is rearrange this formula. We're going to have to manipulate it a little bit. And when we do that, we're going to be able to prove out that 0 factorial is in fact going to be 1. So I'm going to go ahead and get rid of all this stuff here. And what we're going to do is we're going to work on that formula in red, and then we're going to go from there. Okay, so getting rid of all this here. And so what I want to do is think about how I can rewrite this formula that I have in red. So rather than writing it like we have here, I can simply write it as x factorial equal to x, and then times x minus 1, and then factorial on the outside. And so you can test this out. If I were to do a 5 here for x, I would have 5 factorial equal to 5, and then in parentheses, I have 5 minus 1, and then factorial. So essentially what happens here, you have 5 factorial is equal to 5, and then times 4 factorial. That is the same thing because, again, this 4 factorial is going to go all the way down to 1. I'm going to do 4, 3, 2, and 1. And again, that's the same thing as using the formula above. But now what we're doing is we're condensing it. And we're condensing it because now if I go back to the beginning where I rearranged it, so if I get rid of all this here, and I look at what I have right here, now I'm in the format that I need to be in to prove that 0 factorial is in fact going to be 1. So think about how you can do that. And it's not very obvious, and you have to do some rearranging here. But if I simply divide both sides by x, so for example, if I divide this side by x and this side by x, I now have a different variation of that same equation. So for example, x will cancel out here. I now have x factorial all over x equal to x minus 1 factorial. So again, it is the same equation, but we went ahead and rearranged it. So it's in a different format, but it is in fact still the same. And so now think about this. If I were to plug in a 1 into x, what would happen? Well, if I plug in a 1, and I'm going to go ahead and do it over here, I get 1 factorial over 1, right, equal to, in parentheses, 1 minus 1, and then factorial. Well, what is 1 factorial? 1 factorial is 1. And so what I end up having is 1 divided by 1 equal to, well, 1 minus 1 is 0, and then I have 0 factorial. Well, would you look at that? I have now just proved out that 0 factorial is in fact 1 because we know that 1 divided by 1 is 1. So 1 is equal to 0 factorial. There it is. All right, so we just went ahead and proved it out. So that is why 0 factorial is in fact going to be 1. It's not 0, it is going to be 1. And that's essentially how you do it. So again, we started from the original formula for expanding out a factorial. Then we condensed it down. That's what you see right here. And then we ended up rearranging it so we could prove out that 0 factorial is in fact 1. So I hope that you found the video helpful. I hope that you gained something from it. If the video did in fact help you, if you could just go ahead and give it a thumbs up, that would be greatly appreciated. Also, make sure you subscribe, that way you get more math videos in the future, and I'll see you in the next one.